Hi, I'm Dr. Tronél Hellberg from G-sential theory of music, and today we're going to look at the teaching of aural. So let's dive into it. Now let's start with what's expected for CAPS and for IEB SAG. So let's first have a look at CAPS. So in matric, learners should be able to sing a melody. The sheet music and the tonic solfa will be provided. Then secondly, they must be able to clap a melody back to the examiner, in other words, the rhythm. They must be able to identify and sing a minor and a major triad. And then for your indigenous African music and jazz, they must also be able to sing the dominant seventh and the diminished seventh chord, which is really quite difficult. And if we look at sax, it's very similar. So learners need to be able to recognize different tonalities, in other words, major, minor, also do clapping of a 2-bar rhythm, side singing, and then also identifying different cadences, and then identifying the the time signature of a piece. Okay, so how do we go about approaching aural? So the first thing that I would like to highlight is that you focus on musical memory and building the learner's musical memory, as well as the ability to internalize what they hear. Now, I don't know if you can remember when you were at school, when you were doing aural. I can remember for me, it was like, this question is going to come about rhythm or, identifying the time signature. And immediately that first time the melody is played to you, you listen for these elements. And you're so focused on that you actually don't focus on just remembering the melody, which is actually easier, because if you can just listen to the melody, just relax, just listen to the melody, remember the melody, you can answer any question, because you can just go back to that recording that you just made in your mind and answer the questions from there. So tell your learners, it's really the same as when you're walking in a mall and you maybe not even listening to the music, but when you get to the car, you find yourself humming the tune. Okay, so you didn't deliberately focus on that melody or any element in it. You were just actually listening. You weren't in this freeze mode of identify rhythm, identify the keys, the time signature. Okay, so that is very important. Then, secondly, when it gets to the method, and I think this makes sense, but really start very simple. Ask yourself, what's the simplest way that I can teach this? And then keep the goal in mind, the final grade 12 exam. And the thing with both CAPS and SAGs is that they show you what's expected in grade 12, but not in grade 10 and 11. So you need to backtrack and think, okay, what am I going to do before getting to grade 12? What am I going to teach in grade 11? What am I going to teach in grade 10? And work out your own, stepwise systematic method there. Okay, then secondly, make it practical. Okay, always make anything in music, any theoretical concept, make it practical. Link it to songs learners are listening to. Okay, teach awareness. So what do I mean by teaching awareness? What I mean by awareness is to listen, for example, to a song on the radio and tell your learners to listen for certain musical elements. I see I wrote here how many bars. Maybe that's not a good idea, because maybe there are 100 bars. Okay, but maybe they can see if they can count it. Okay, but more important, than that is, can they hear where the beginning is of each bar? And can they keep the beat? Can they identify? So once they've got the beat, can they identify what the time signature is? Which instruments are playing? There's a voice, there's a guitar, there are drums, there's a violin. Okay, is it major? Is it minor? Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it? Are there any repeats? Can they identify the cadences, the quality of chords? Okay, are there many minor chords, many major chords, diminished chord? Can they actually recognize a diminished chord or maybe an augmented chord? Okay, so those are the kinds of things that you can tell them to start listening for, because before you and they know it, every time they get in the car or they listen to a piece of music, they're going to start to listen to these musical elements, which is ultimately going to help them with aural. Then another exercise that you can do is to start with short clapping exercises. Okay, so this is going to prepare them for that question in the final matric exam. Okay, so start with one bar. Start with just being able to clap beats, just crotchets. Okay, I know it sounds simple, but if you empowering them on this journey, they feel, yes, I can do this, and you're also building their confidence. Okay, so now you can start bringing in rhythms, but again, simple. Make it a mixture between crotchets and quavers. Okay, then you can introduce semiquavers, maybe a dotted rhythm. Okay, and when they're okay and feeling relaxed, not go into freeze mode with one bar. You know, they can listen to it and they can recall it without getting confused with the rhythms that they hear, or that they can hear what happened in each beat. Then you can add another bar and another bar and another bar until you get to your 4 bars. So yes, gradually increase the length and the level of difficulty. And then I would just like to make you aware of something, that learners, that they might understand the difference between a dotted quaver and a semiquaver group and a triplet with a crotchet and a quaver, but when they clap it, it sounds as if they're clapping a crotchet and a quaver as a triplet. So, okay, then the next thing is to do some sight singing and the singing of triads or chords. And I would really recommend using tonic solfa for it. Now, before you can get to triads, you need to start with intervals. So you focus on your perfect intervals, your major intervals. And then, in terms of your interval recognition, like I said, I would recommend using solfa, but you can also use the first 2 notes of the opening of a song. Okay. Very important when it actually gets to that is to not underestimate how difficult it can be for learners to identify and sing a major versus a minor interval. So just be aware of that. Now, I just want to say something about the tonic solfa. The reason why I would recommend using the tonic solfa instead of just telling learners, okay, this song starts with these notes, this is the interval, just remember this, this connotation to the song. The reason why solfa works much, much better is it provides learners with a solid, practical way to grasp the relation between different pitches. If they understand how tonic solfa works, it's much easier for them to just identify it. Okay, so you start with identifying intervals. Once they can identify, you move on to singing. Okay, and you just focus on one interval at a time. So you work on, you can decide, do you want to take it, work according to the quality? So just focus on major, minor, and then introduce, once I get that, no, before you can go to your more, your diminished and augmented, you first need to look at major and perfect intervals across your spectrum of intervals, so seconds, thirds, fifths, whatever. Okay, once I grasp that, yes, then you do exactly the same. Start with identifying diminished, augmented intervals, and then once I get that right, you can also move on to the singing of those intervals. And once they really solid on the intervals, you can start introducing your triads, and from there also chords. Okay, so I want you to teach beyond grade 12 standard. And if you think of my previous slide, I already talked about introducing them to augmented and diminished intervals and triads. Okay, so I want you to over-prepare them so that they can overachieve. Okay, so if they're used to difficult stuff, the easy stuff is really going to be very easy in the exam. So how do you do it? So you're going to expand their listening skills. You're going to increase the length of exercises. So you start with a bar and you gradually build on that. You're going to introduce different quality of triads, intervals. You can even introduce inversion and chord progression. Okay, so imagine if they get that right, what's expected in a grade 12 exam is absolutely nothing for them. I just want to quickly have a look at the teaching of the tonic solfa or solfege, whatever you prefer. So what is it? Why do we use it, and how do we use it? Okay, so it's basically to assign unique syllables for each scale degree. What it really does, it helps us to understand the relation of pitches within a scale and a melody. Okay, it's really it gives learners an inner understanding of those relationships. I've seen it so often that learners who know tonic solfa are much better to identify and sing intervals and triads than those that are looking at the sheet music and are just trying to sing that triad or sing that interval. Okay, so what it really does is it trains your ear. It develops that inner hearing of pitches, which merely looking at sheet music doesn't do. Okay, let's have a look at the method for tonic solfa. Always start with warm-up exercises. You don't want the learners to damage their vocal cords. Of course, start simple. I would suggest sticking with major scales in grade 10. You can start with C major, and then you can also introduce other majors, and you need to, of course, explain to them and introduce the movable do. And then I would like to recommend a couple of really excellent videos to use in class. Okay, so the first one is Solfa Singing 101, the difference between do and re. The next one is do, re, mi, adding so and do and so. And then the last one, the D clef, solfa on the staff. Now, there is nothing such as a D clef. Okay, it's really a brilliant video, but please make learners aware of it that there isn't something like a D clef. We only have the movable C clef, and that is what this person is talking about. Okay, and then lastly, always a great song and a great film to use when you're doing tonic solfa is to go to The Sound of Music and do the do, re, mi song with the learners. They already know it. And then what you can do is you can start replacing the words with solfa syllables. And then you can, and I think I've said this, once they're really clear and solid on major scales, you can move to minor scales, perhaps in grade 11. And then you'll remember when I first started this presentation that I showed you that example from the matric syllabus. And if you're not clear on solfa notation, you'll see that there are lines. It would say something about do. It will have colons. If you don't understand the notation, just go to my grade 3 book. I go into quite a bit of detail in, what the different symbols and signs mean. I trust that you enjoyed this and that you found it helpful and that it's going to make the teaching of oral to your learners a lot easier.